courtyard and danced with our memories of love and enchantment. Golden the sun when high in the sky, then she closed her eyes in the moment. There was once a girl who dreamed of angels and demons and all in between. Kept her mouth shut and her dreams like her family. Tempered her memories and bowed to her betters like lowly. Spare me, memories escape me. Lowly, use me, memories escape me. There was once a girl who dreamed of angels and demons and all in between. Tired her body and weary her mind, gentle her memory of family love and enchantment. Golden the sun when high in the sky, then she closed her eyes in the moment. Enchantment. Golden the sun when high in the sky, then she closed her eyes in the moment.
Vinyl did not register Voron knocking Octavia from Vellum's grip. She did not register anything either of them said. She only registered the heavy thump of a body landing next to her, wet spray across her face, and the smell of blood.
You stupid fool! What have you done?
Daddy!
Vinyl poured everything she had into opening her eyes one more time. She was dying. She knew it with crystal clarity. Only dying could feel this bad. Inside and out, everything was only pain. She managed to prise back her lids and found herself looking straight into Octavia's wide purple eyes. Octavia was shaking. No, she was convulsing. Her throat was so dark with blood it appeared black in the light of the cellar. Yet, despite the shudders racking her body, she did not break eye contact. Haltingly, she raised a forehoof to her neck. Vinyl thought she was touching the wound in shock, the way many victims did. Death was such an unwelcome surprise to some ponies that only touching their own mortal injury was enough to convince them they were dying. Octavia, however, did not seem surprised at the ragged bite Vellum had taken. With grim determination, she brought her cupped, bloody hoof to Vinyl's mouth.
Drinking blood healed him before.
She whispered laboriously.
Please, Vinyl. They were going to kill me anyway, and you know it.
Tears streaked her face.
Please, Celestia, let this work. Don't let her die.
Vinyl tried instinctively to resist, but Octavia easily pushed her hoof into her mouth. The familiar coppery taste touched her tongue, awakening memories she had desperately tried to forget for 10 years.
I don't care what you are or the past.
Octavia slurred.
I love you for who you are. No, not what was.
Her eyes dimmed.
Please live for me.
Her breath hitched wetly in her throat.
Don't let him make you into some pony. You're not.
Her words became a single breath, and then she was still. Her bloodied hoof hit the floor. Her eyes still stared, but Vinyl knew they could no longer see her. Octavia was dead. Her Tavy was dead. Just like that, Vinyl was a small child again, screaming for the only other pony who had loved her for her, and who her father's twisted plans had taken away.
Run now! Run, Winter Song!
I love you.
I'm happy. I'm alive.
Please live for me.
Something exploded inside Vinyl at that moment. Maybe it was that taste of blood. Maybe it was a last reserve of strength not even she knew she had. Or maybe she was powered by nothing more than raw grief and rage. Whatever it was, it allowed her to pull herself over to the pony who had loved her more than life itself, and accept her final gift. As Octavia's blood flowed down her throat, Vinyl felt the last fragments of the curse snap, and the dark power inside her surge out of its prison. Her nubby teeth elongated into sharp points. Her eyes prickled with heat. Strength rushed back into her limbs. She felt cuts close up, and bruises melt away, leaving her dirty, but whole and brimming with more strength than ever before. When she raised her head, mouth dripping, she knew her eyes were glowing full red for the first time in a decade. And she did not fight the change. Vinyl roared.
What the?
Vellum started to say. Vinyl moved faster than a striking snake. Voron and Vellum flew apart, each reeling from her blows. He landed lightly, lips pulled back in a snarl as his own eyes flared red. Vellum opened her wings to save herself, bearing fangs painted with blood. Octavia's blood. Vinyl was beyond rational thought. She moved on pure instinct, every action dictated by the savagery of her own emotions. Something tickled her mind, but she forced it back, completely taken up with vaulting off the wall and pinning Vellum to the floor. The other vampire was a hissing, spitting bundle from air to concrete. Her teeth raked at Vinyl's forelegs, and she kicked upwards, trying to crush her belly with her hind hooves. Her wings beat fruitlessly, shredding feathers each time they struck her assailant.
Violetta, stop! I command you to stop!
Came a deep voice from far away.
Please, leave us. Let her be normal.
Violetta, stop!
If you leave her here with me, she could be a normal pony.
Get off me! You traitor! You don't deserve to be a part of Daddy's court! Daddy, I think she's going to cry. Big sis, don't cry. That's so babyish.
Violetta!
The tickling inside Vinyl's head grew stronger. Voron roared.
I command you to stop!
He was inside her head. He was trying to use the reignited connection between them to make her bend to his will. It has always worked before. None of his children had ever been able to resist him.
A successful unicorn gat who carries my blood. Do you even know how rare you are?
He had no idea. He had never had any idea. 10 years is a long time. It is an especially long time when one is learning magic, the way Vinyl had. She was much, much more powerful now than she had been when kind ponies pulled her battered and broken body out of a river and unknowingly set her on the path to a new and brighter life. Her horn glowed. Furniture around the room lifted off the ground, encased not in her usual pink signature, but in a bright red radiance. Like it was caught in a whirlpool, it began to circle the room, picking up speed as it went. Music stands, books, instruments, chairs, the table, all of it flew like scraps of paper in a gale. The piano chimed discordantly, wires and keys snapping loose as it ricocheted off the wall. The broken pieces of music stand Voron had torn in half clattered in ever-accelerating loops. At their center, a tiny, unmoving gray body.
Violetta!
Voron yelled above the din.
Stop this madness at once!
Vinyl lifted her head. The light fittings shattered, sending glass shards into the maelstrom, and plunging the little room into darkness. This proved no problem for the 3 vampires, who continued to snarl and bare fangs at each other in the gloom.
You're not the boss of me anymore!
Voron leaped. The piano crashed down where he had been. For a second he lost his footing, and it seemed as though he would be snatched up by the unnatural wind. But he grappled a hold on the uneven stones of the wall and hung on, mane plastered against his face and neck. Pain seared across Vinyl's chest. She looked down to see Vellum's teeth buried there. She had taken the opportunity presented by Vinyl's diverted attention. Ribs crunched in her powerful jaws. Vinyl brought a hoof down on her sister's head, but Vellum's bite was too strong. Pulling her free meant pulling out a chunk of her own flesh and bone. Vinyl felt Voron move behind her, though she didn't need to turn to see him. Working his way across the stones would not take him long. The maelstrom faltered as another rib shattered. Vinyl wasn't sure afterwards whether she made the decision or the decision made her. Either way, her head whipped forward and she drove her teeth deep into her sister's skull. Vellum screamed into her mouthful. Vinyl tasted revolting blood. It burned her tongue, yet she held on, knowing that if she didn't, she was dead, and Octavia's sacrifice had been for nothing. She released her hold on Vellum's forehooves, shifting to brace her hind hooves on the other vampire's hips. Her rump pointed awkwardly into the air as she hooked her forehooves between Vellum's ribcage and upper forelegs. Vellum battered at her with her newly freed hooves, grabbing handfuls of mane and tearing it out with chunks of bloody scalp still attached.
No!
Voron thundered, understanding clear in his shout.
Vanilla, no!
Too late. Vinyl snapped her body straight, digging in all four hooves and clamping her jaws tight as she arched her neck. Vellum's body, smaller than her own and already strained tight in her grip, tore across the middle, spilling viscera onto the concrete floor. She had time to look surprised before, with a wet popping crunch, her head came away from her neck.
No!
Vinyl tossed her head, releasing the skull with its frothy bouncing curls to be swept up by the maelstrom of her own magic. She spat out the blood still in her mouth and leapt free of the eviscerated corpse, clutching her chest wound with one forehoof. Every breath was a gloopy wheeze, and the crunching sensation when she moved was nauseating. Yet there was no time to focus on her injuries. She felt and heard Voron's attack, but had no time to react before he struck. He cannoned into her from behind like a runaway carriage. What should have laid her flat instead sent them sprawling, as she deftly turned it into a roll. He tried to get a grip under her chin from behind, but she bit down hard on one, cracking the hardest part of the hoof but missing the soft blood-rich frog at the center. He snarled right into her ear. She scrambled, trying to get her hooves under her so she could buck him off, or at least keep him away from the side of her exposed neck. She brought him up sharply, trying to crush his face, but the impact only succeeded in giving him extra momentum to tear off her ear. Pain radiated through her skull, momentarily blotting out all else, right when she needed all her senses.
No, I won't die like this!
Finally, gathering her hooves, she rocketed backwards, pinning Voron against the wall with her body weight and her magic. He doggedly gripped her midriff from behind, trying with one good and one ruined hoof to tear it open. She stamped, kicked, struggled, and battered at him, trying to free herself so she could throw the contents of the whirling room at him. He growled into her ruined ear.
You will never be free of me, Vanelda. In this life or the next, you will always be mine.
With a wordless cry, she summoned part of the broken music stand to her, bringing it up behind her to shove deep into his side. She hoped she'd hit vital organs from the blunt object, but the stab was an untidy one, and she couldn't be sure. The shock of it had the desired effect. Voron convulsed, and she leapt free, skidding around to face him in the center of the room. A whirling dervish of furniture whipped between them like a swollen river. Something red flashed past. She caught sight of Vellum's curls and wide-open mouth. Voron's hoof whipped out, snatching it from midair. He cradled Vellum's head almost gently, giving it a look Vinyl would have called fatherly on any pony else.
Little one,
he murmured, stroking back her devastated pigtails.
you were always Daddy's favorite. Always my good little girl.
He planted a kiss on her forehead.
Our children will carry on our legacy, my dear. She will not tarnish what you did for the betterment of our family.
Vinyl tensed when he looked up at her, expression melting into a snarl as he brought his hooves together, crushing Vellum's skull into bloody pulp and shattered bone. He ducked his head, gulping mouthfuls of brain matter and squishy red meat. He tugged free an eyeball, chewing briefly before swallowing.
If you take her eyes, can I have them? I like the way they pop when you tuck them under your cheek and then bite down.
Vanelda, what you have done is unforgivable.
With one foreleg, Voron pulled free the music stand and rammed it deep into the concrete floor.
You have disobeyed me for the last time. Your worth is not equal to what you have cost me tonight.
He threw the remains of Vellum's skull with such force that they ripped through the maelstrom and splattered against her face and the foreleg she had instinctively raised. It was a dirty trick. She leapt aside, but her concentration had been compromised. Voron bounded through the maelstrom, punching his way through the table that tried to get in his way, resisting the pull of her telekinesis with sheer momentum and raw strength. It should have been impossible for him to do more than stand against her power. But this was Voron, and Voron was good at doing the impossible, if it meant dominating her. Sudden, icy fear swept through Vinyl. It was old emotion, frosted hard by history. She couldn't stand against him. He was Voron. All you could do was run from Voron, and even then it wasn't enough. He always got what he wanted. Always.
No!
In desperation, she cast the only spell she could think of. Fireworks sprayed from her horn, hitting him in the chest. The smell of burnt fur hit her before he did. She kept casting, but she was weakening, and she knew it. Octavia's blood was not enough to sustain her through this level of combat. She punched frantically at Voron's throat, trying to crush his windpipe, throwing fireworks into his eyes to blind him. He roared in pain, and she wriggled free, trying to buck him so hard in the chin she half expected his head to fly off. No such luck. He swept out a foreleg, catching hold of her haunch. She heard the crack before she felt the pain from her own thigh bone. A scream ripped from her, unbidden. She staggered away on 3 legs, trying to lift her injured one, but only able to drag it limply behind her. Voron clambered to his own hooves, wiping blood from his eyes. He growled low in his throat. His eyes glowed red, the irises bathed in white fire that made him look like the demons ponies wrote about in books about Tartarus. Despite herself, Vinyl backed up. She let out a cry as she stumbled over something, pain ripping up her injured leg. She spared a glance and saw Octavia, half rolled onto her back from being stepped on. Her eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling. All at once, Vinyl realized she would never get away from Voron. He was too strong. He had always been too strong. Even when she had escaped him long enough to build a new life for herself, he had always been there, inside her head. Not the controlling presence of a childhood and adolescence, but a memory so strong he dictated her behavior. Even after she had thought herself a brand new pony, Vinyl's Scratch, just an ordinary unicorn like anyone else. Not Vanelda Varshovsky, daughter of a monster. She had never truly let herself be free of him. Since the day she was born, He had always been a part of her, waiting in the wings while she acted out her life on a stage she thought he would never set hoof on again. But he had. He always had. He always would. Unless... Vinyl set her stance.
You want me so bad, Daddy? Come and get me. I'd rather die than give it to you ever again!
Foolish child! You could have been part of something so much greater than yourself. And instead you force my hoof like this. I am ashamed to call you my daughter. The only thing you are useful for now is as a blood bag, just like those useless children of Celestia you so wanted to be like!
I'd rather be one of Celestia's children than be the daughter of someone who's so pathetic that not even their own father could stand to have him around. No matter what you do, you'll never be good enough for him. Never!
Voron's eyes flashed hot as the surface of the sun. With a screech, he galloped at her, zigzagging so fast even she could barely track his movements. In less than a heartbeat, he was in front of her, and she thought she had made a major miscalculation. She felt his breath, smelled the blood on it, saw the raw hatred in his eyes, and cast the spell she had used 10 years ago to cover up the crime scene in Professor Orchid's office. Instantly, the wavering maelstrom became a swath of flame. Voron looked up, aghast, and was about to bolt when Vinyl leapt up at him. He reared back, clearly expecting the attack to come from her jaws. Her broken leg shrieked, but she threw all her weight and strength into plunging the broken shaft of the wooden cello neck up under his rib cage and into his twisted black heart. The maelstrom hurtled inwards at the insane speed it had picked up as it whirled around them, crushing everything in its path. Vinyl pumped everything she had into her magic and her muscles. She would not let Voron get away. As the flames rose higher and higher, the entire practice room became a conflagration. From within it, a roar became a scream, became a keening wail, and finally, stopped. Sunlight painted strange patterns on the walls. One of them had left the window open all night. There was a bite to the air that spoke of the promise of winter. It would be the running of the leaves soon.
What are you thinking of?
Came a sleepy voice from her chest. She looked down.
Good morning. How long have you been awake?
Octavia yawned delicately into her cupped hoof.
Not long. I was just too comfortable to say anything. You make an exceedingly cozy pillow.
You wouldn't have to use me as a pillow if you didn't wriggle around so much while you sleep.
I like to listen to your heartbeat.
She turned her face upwards, smiling. A strand of hair fell across her face. She looked rumpled and content, and absolutely beautiful.
Celestia, damn it. You're pretty.
Oh, shush. I need a shower, mascara, and a main brush before I look even halfway decent.
If you weren't pretty, would I do this?
Violent?
The taste of her lips is as wonderful now as it was the first time they kissed, though much less hasty than those stolen moments in her dorm room so many years ago.
You're incorrigible.
Cool?
Don't pretend I'm with me, Vinyl Scratch. I know you're not as thick as you make out.
Octavia heaved herself into a sitting position and immediately clasped her forelegs around herself with a shiver.
Ooh. Oh, blast it all. Did I forget to shut the window again? Sorry, love. It's like an icebox in here.
All the more reasons for snuggles.
Vinyl!
She squeaked as she was pulled down again into another embrace.
Vinyl! I have to go to work, and I really do need a shower first.
I'm pretty sure snuggles eclipse showers.
They do not!
Do too.
You really are the most incorrigible wretch. You know that?
Yeah, but you love me anyhow.
Octavia's head thumped down on the pillow, framed perfectly between white forelegs. She smiled upwards.
Yes, I do love you, but I don't love being a smelly beast.
I'd kiss you even if you smelled of old fish, and cow dung, and moldy cheese.
You paint such a lovely picture.
She reached up, pulling her down for another deep kiss.
Whatever did I do with myself before you came into my life, you grotty creature?
She traced her hoof lightly, producing a shiver of pleasure.
Oh, it's like that, is it?
Their kiss seemed to go on for too long, and at the same time ended far too soon. The alarm clock rattled out a warning that they were indeed going to be late for work.
To be continued.
To be continued. Very much so. I might even let you get the front door closed when you get home.
I love you, Tabby.
And I love you too, Vinyl. Now, shoo. You'll be home late today, so I'll wait up for you, okay? 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 I'll wait up for you, okay?
When I was a little girl, I believed in fairy tales. I wished my toys would come to life and that my stories could be real. Then through all the noise and confusion, I believed it was all an illusion. The world had faded black and white, nothing seemed to be right. But now I know that how it goes is that my dreams never die. As long as I keep the magic inside me alive. Do you believe in magic? Do you believe in magic? As simple as a wave, special moments made when you believe in magic.
I love you, Vinyl. I'll wait for you. Forever.
The smell of charred flesh and wood filled the air. The walls of the practice room were so burned, it was impossible even to see the outline of the door. Abruptly, the still-hot pile moved. Plumes of ash curled up and out as the top shifted. Vinyl pushed aside what remained of her furniture. It tumbled onto the floor, shattering into ashy fragments. With great effort, she pulled herself and then her cargo free and rolled down the side of the pile. It wasn't especially tall, but she hit the floor with a jolt that elicited a cry and lay there for several moments. At no point had she let go of what she was holding. Octavia had landed against Vinyl's chest when they hit the floor. Her cheek appeared pillowed there, as if she had just gone to sleep. If one ignored the massive wound that had ended her life, or the fact that they were both singed from where Vinyl's protective barrier had not quite managed to keep them safe, as her firestorm burned Voron to a crisp. His body was still in the burned pile, as twisted outside now as it had always been on the inside. Vinyl had no compulsion to dig him out. She had watched from behind her barrier as he burned. It hadn't been enough to stake him the way old legends demanded you stake vampires. She had forced herself to the very limits of her strength to make sure he was finally, ultimately dead.
He's gone, Davy,
she whispered. Her voice was scratchy and brought on a coughing fit that caused Octavia's body to slide sideways. Vinyl caught her, dragging her back into place. She stroked Octavia's mane, the movements jagged with exhaustion.
He's really gone.
Beside them, the ash pile shifted and collapsed inwards, filling in the hole Vinyl had created and burying Voron's body once more.
All my life, I dreamt of him being... I thought that if I could finally be free of him, I'd feel...
She had nothing left to cry with. That didn't stop her body trying. She bit her lip, chest too injured to tolerate the stress of sobbing as deeply as she wanted to.
It was all I ever wanted.
She circled her forelegs around Octavia, burying her face in the top of her mane.
It wasn't worth the cost.
And there, in the tattered remains of her life, Vinyl Scratch screamed out her endless grief.
No! Davy! I'm sorry. Davy!
Tiptoe lived up to her name. She liked to think she was the quietest pony who ever played hide-and-seek, although Bluebell from Class 2B was renowned champion of the playground. Still, she reckoned not even Bluebell could have snuck out of her tent without waking any of her tent mates, which had to count for more than just winning games of hide-and-seek, right? Outside, the air hummed with the sound of cicadas. Tiptoe paused to make sure no pony was awake to see her scurry across the meadow towards the toilet tent. It was one thing to need the bathroom in the middle of the night because of scary stories. It was another to be caught and called a baby for the remainder of the trip. She used the tent and re-emerged with a sigh and a shiver. There was a nip in the air. Her mummy would have said she needed a scarf. Maybe just this once, Mummy was right. Tiptoe picked her way back towards her tent, hoping she could get back inside and snuggle into her sleeping bag before any pony realized she had been gone. Philly Scout rules said she was supposed to have woken her tent leader and be escorted to the bathroom, but that was far too humiliating a prospect. However, when the strange pony stepped into her path, she kind of wished Charmer was by her side. Charmer was a unicorn, and nothing seemed to scare her. Sometimes there is nothing more frightening than to be a tiny earth pony with no one else around to remind you that you have no wings or magic. She squeaked. Surely there hadn't been any pony else there a second ago. She had checked. And this pony wasn't a Philly Scout leader either. Tiptoe had never seen her before in her life. She cowered down in the grass. The pony was tall. Moonlight turned it into a genderless silhouette, but when it spoke, the voice was unmistakably female.
Are you Tiptoe Bilberry?
Tiptoe cowered even lower, then stopped. No, she should act more like Charmer. Nothing scared Charmer.
Who wants to know?
Are you?
She stuck out her bottom lip.
I can't tell you. You're a stranger. And if you don't leave right now, I'm gonna scream and wake up every pony. Because strangers aren't allowed in our campsite. We rented this field. It's ours until next Thursday.
I can feel the blood bond.
The stranger said cryptically, ignoring Tiptoe's threat.
Yeah. You're definitely who I've come for.
She took a step back and opened her mouth to scream. Before she could, hooves clamped over her mouth. She stared with wide, terrified eyes into the face of the bigger pony. How in Celestia's name had she moved so fast?
Sorry, kid. I know this isn't your fault.
Tiptoe tried to struggle as the mare carried her away, but she was held too tight, and they moved so fast. In what seemed like only a few heartbeats, they were out of the field with barely a bump, as the mare opened the gate in the fence and left it wide.
Then again, it wasn't my fault either. It wasn't any of our faults. This is just the way things have to be. For what it's worth, though, I am sorry, kid. Tiptoe, I'll remember your name. I always remember the names. It's the least I can do.
Tiptoe tried to cry out as the pony drew her back and then hurled her into the air as easily as if she was throwing a baseball. She sailed over the edge of the quarry that neighbored the campsite. All the Philly Scouts had been told on the very first day not to leave the field, and definitely not to wander too close to the edge. That was why they were supposed to leave the tents in pairs at night. As she fell, she saw the mare poised on the edge, forelegs still outstretched. Her whole body was highlighted in the moonlight, her fur as white as Tiptoe's own, but her eyes as red as poppies. And then Tiptoe hit the rocks at the bottom and knew no more. Vinyl stared down at the tiny broken body. It didn't get any easier. She turned away. The image burned into her mind. So many dead children. So many left who needed to die. She could feel them. It was faint, unless she concentrated, but she could feel them, their minds' nebulous presences dotted around Equestria. She couldn't pinpoint towns or houses unless she was much closer. But if she concentrated, she could pick directions and just keep walking until their minds coalesced into something more substantial. Voron's last gift. Or maybe this was the same with all vampires. She was the head of this bloodline now. It made a twisted kind of sense that his ability to sense his children would pass to her, his eldest, now that he was gone. It made wiping all trace of him from the world that much easier. She couldn't take the risk. Every single one of the foals Voron and Vellum had made was a threat to Equestria. Every single one had the potential to become a vampire, or at the very least, to pass on the vampire gene. She couldn't allow that. Voron's plans could not be allowed to come to fruition. It was her only reason for carrying on now. The spell book that she might have used to tamp down her vampirism again had burned up in the practice room 2 years ago. Her life in the sun had burned up with it. Not that she wanted that life, if it didn't have Octavia in it. She needed a reason to have survived. She needed everything she had suffered and lost to have not been for nothing. And so she followed the minds she could feel. She traveled as far as she needed to and did what needed to be done. And gradually, the number of minds she could feel had grown smaller. With every life she snuffed out, the number grew smaller still. When she could feel no more at all, only then would she allow herself to rest. Only then would her life have had some meaning. A thin band of light skimmed the horizon. Soon the Philly Scout campsite would wake. Soon they would realize Tiptoe was gone. They would look for her, find the open gate, and discover her body at the bottom of the quarry. An accident, they would say. A tragic, terrible accident that could have been prevented if only she had woken up her tent leader when she got up in the night. Vinyl was well practiced in making crime scenes look like anything but what they were.
Not yet,
she whispered to the soon-to-rise sun. She sprinted away too fast for mortal eyes to see.
I still have work to do.
When all her father's offspring were gone, then she could rest.
I'll see you then, Tavi. Wait for me, love. Tavi, I'm so sorry. I know you're scared, but I'm not gonna let him hurt you. Words are pounding in my head, an unearthed hunger for the blood she shed. Seen the hatred in those eyes again. Thinks he owns me like he did back then, but I won't be his monster. Can't make me a monster. Not gonna be his monster. He's the only monster. I thought
thought that you and I were fine. Mortal ponies living in our prime. How did he find me after all this time? I'm so sorry that I've been so blind. Peeling back the layers of my curse. With every wave it's feeling worse and worse. But I have to find a way to immerse. Cause this nightmare only I can reverse. I've gotta be a monster. Monster. Yes, I'll be a monster. Monster.